gotten up and left? No, they have not gotten up and left. They're still here. Waiting to shake hands.
Grady Judd is a great guy, great man, and I ran into him several weeks ago, and he said, "Governor, there's a certain fellow that is on death row, and he's been there for about 30 years, and he killed a friend of mine, one of the deputy sheriffs here." And so he asked me if I would sign that warrant, which I did. Not the most fun thing to do as a governor, I will tell you, but justice must be done, and there must be consequences to people's actions. I believe in the death penalty. I think it's right. I believe in justice that says that there are consequences to your actions. And let me give you an example of it and why it's so important to Florida and so important to Florida's future success. I served in the state Senate like these great legislators, and it was an honor to serve in the Florida legislature. I'll never forget it. But I was elected in '92, and in the mid-'90s, around 1995, Florida had gained a dubious distinction. We were at that time #1 in violent crime in America, Paul. Nobody was better at it than Florida. Every 3 minutes and 45 seconds, another rape, robbery, or murder was occurring in Florida. It was all over the newspapers every single day, on the evening news every single night. You couldn't get away from it. Well, I remember it had gotten so bad that at one point, then Governor Longchild was on a trip down to Miami. When he got out of the SUV, he literally put on a bulletproof vest. Well, CNN was around, and they saw it, and within 30 seconds, it was around the world. Now, in a state that depends so much on tourism for our economic well-being, that wasn't such a great message. But he did what he had to do to be safe. The point was, we're #1 in violent crime in America, and the reason was simple, in my humble opinion. We had a flawed policy. It was called early release. Remember that? Early release and game time. Basically, Madam President, what that means is that if you're bad and get into prison because you were bad, but if you're good after you got there, you can get out early and maybe go be bad again. Now, if you get that, you deserve to be in Washington, D.C. It doesn't make any sense at all. Not at all. That is a system that doesn't have the appropriate consequences for your actions. As a result of early release and game time, back in the mid-'90s in Florida, inmates in our state were only serving about 20% of their sentences. 20%. You know, a great sheriff like Grady Judd may get a good conviction, and somebody gets sentenced by a good judge, representative, to say 10 years in jail. But because of the flawed liberal policy of early release and game time, they're out in 2 years. 2 years. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I'm smart enough to figure out that if you let people out that early, over and over and over again, guess what? You end up getting to live in a state that was #1 in violent crime in America. Now, this story is to me named Kathleen Finnegan. You probably don't know Kathleen Finnegan, but I do. Kathleen Finnegan was a prosecutor in Charlotte County, down on the Gulf Coast before. Great lady, great prosecutor. She was prosecuting a case years ago with another assistant state attorney. And on a Friday afternoon, Randy, they got the conviction. And they were pleased that they had done that, John. And they wanted to go out and celebrate at the local Holiday Inn for dinner. So they did. They went and had dinner together, had a nice meal, Paul. And, you know, because they had made their county a little more safe, they were happy. After they finished their meal, they got out, or walking out the door, just like you will after this lunch today, to go to their respective vehicles and go home. Unfortunately, at that point, they got abducted by a man at gunpoint, who forced the two of them into his car, drove them to a rural part of Charlotte County, got them both out, put them both face down on the ground, shot them both, and left them for dead. Fortunately, Kathleen was not killed, even though she was shot multiple times. Regrettably, the other assistant state attorney was murdered. He did know. Well, Kathleen's a tough lady. She went to work right away, doing her homework on the man who had perpetrated this crime against her and her friend. And you know what she found out? He had already been in the criminal justice system in Florida. But you know what? He was let out on early release. And so because of early release, he had the chance to perpetrate this crime against her and her friend. So she didn't stop there. She decided to find a way through common sense that would make it so that that wouldn't happen again in Florida. And she started a movement called STOP. Some of you, I'm sure, remember. It stood for Stop Turning Out Prisoners. And she had a bill that she wanted to pass in the Florida legislature called the STOP Bill. What did that bill do? Paul, was simple. It said instead of 20%, criminals in Florida would have to serve at least 85% of their sentences. Well, she comes into my office in Tallahassee, and I'm just a young state senator, tells me her story, looks me in the eye, and says, Charlie, will you sponsor my bill? I just say no. I said, of course I will. It'd be an honor to sponsor your bill. I did, and we were able to get it passed, Mr. Chairman. And ever since then, crime has been going down in Florida. And 2 weeks ago on a Wednesday in Orlando, I had the opportunity and privilege with a bunch of great sheriffs across this state to stand up and talk about the fact that crime was down almost 8% in the first 6 months of this year again in Florida. That's common sense leadership that you deserve, that your children deserve. And the best ideas don't come from those that are in office, they come from you. From the South. God bless you for participating in the Republican Party. Thank you, Mr. President, for having us here today. And to both chairmen, God bless you all. Thank you very much. God bless you all.